Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined on our state-of-the-art radio program by my first officer, Jeremy Grapenden. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, as you are all aware, we are fast approaching the end of the month of May for the year of 2016, and in the United States, that means we are also fast approaching the holiday of Memorial Day. In fact, Memorial Day will be this coming Monday. However, folks, I hesitate to call it a holiday because I think that cheapens it and robs it of the great amount of solemnity and seriousness that is owed to that day of days. We here in America oftentimes take our liberty for granted, and that makes it far too easy for us to forget the things that truly matter. And chief among those things that matter, especially on Memorial Day, is providing those who gave their all, who selflessly donned the uniform of the United States to stand up for our cherished liberties and rights, without second thought, plunging themselves into harm's way to stand up for their firm principles and convictions. They deserve to be honored. And this day of observance is about them and honoring them, particularly those who paid the ultimate price so that the rest of us might live free from governmental tyranny and oppression. But on top of this, it's important to recall that we must not commit a certain social faux pas that a great many Americans make, albeit unintentionally, when they wish one another, quote-unquote, happy Memorial Day. Unfortunately, the day is not about celebratory or joyous functions. It's a solemn day of remembrance of the great sacrifices that have been made. And because if we did not have this vanguard of liberty, we would not have the ability to enjoy and exercise our fundamental and inalienable rights. But to fully explain this and to delve more deeply into what it means, it requires that we delve back into the annals of history for the United States. We have to turn the hands of time back for a period of 151 years to a time when hostilities had ended in the bloodiest fight of American history, the most divisive fight of American history, a fight where American citizen was pitted against American citizen, and the scars of the nation were deeply felt. Of course, this is very poignant for today. It's still applicable for today if you think back to what happened in last summer, the summer that we have named the summer of the poisonous doctrine of political correctness and moral relativism. For you see, the holiday, or rather, more aptly, the day of observance, was created by Confederate widows, mothers, and sisters and daughters who had all lost loved ones, who went to the graves, or if they didn't have the graves, who went to a central site to lay wreaths in remembrance of their fallen loved ones. And it was later picked up by the North as well as a form of reconciliation, a form of healing, a form of understanding the brave sacrifices that were made by all of the soldiers that were involved in the conflict known as the American Civil War. Of course, the day was named originally Remembrance Day. And I think that that title, that name, is certainly more apt for the day because it applies more to what the purpose of the day is. We are there to remember the sacred dead who took a stance for a cause they believed in, for a principal set of beliefs that they held near and dear. It's a true integral part of who we are as a nation and a people. Unfortunately, it was FDR that renamed it to Memorial Day. And I think that that robbed it. I think that that stole its deeper meaning.
Well, just like you said, Randy, it's an integral part of our history, our culture, and what we thrive on in regards to recognition. It as we talk about this, I can't help but wonder what's going to happen to days of remembrance that occurred in our lifetime, if they're going to be changed, or if they're even going to be forgotten in some fashion as to why we would why we even remembered those days and events to begin with. And one key event, I think, which is going to impact all of
Nine
us,
11.
9/11. It seems, it's been, what, 15 years now. This September will be 15 years since its occurrence. And many individuals, especially the younger generation, uh, people that I've come to know in my life that are, 21, 22 years old, even 25 years old, they don't seem to remember everything that happened on that day. And I still remember exactly what I was doing at the very moment the first plane hit the towers.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it because it entrenched such a deep feeling of fear and hatred and worry all at the same time. It was an emotion that I've never felt before.
Oh,
And
it was the gamut of emotions,
yeah,
and we all felt it.
and
We
I
all
can't
did.
help but believe that what we felt on that day is the same as what those widows and sons and daughters and mothers, felt back then in, developing and coming up with Remembrance Day. So it's an imperative that we never forget these things. We never forget history, no matter how bad it was or tragic it was, because it's a part of us. It would be like we can't be a whole country if all we did was focus on the good things that we did. It would be like saying, well, okay, you broke your arm, so we'll just cut your arm off, but we're still going to consider you to be a whole person because it's politically correct to do so, but yet you're handicapped now. And that's what it is. Forgetting history or rewriting history, it's placing a handicap on our country and our culture.
And it's designed to do so. These nefarious historical revisionists who are practicing nothing short of cultural Marxism want to tear this country apart. It's like what we saw happen in the 1940s with China.
Mm-hmm.
In 1948, when the Communist Chinese took over under Mao Zedong, they did what they called the Cultural Revolution. That is where they purposefully went around destroying the rich, deep, and varied history of China. And they did it because they realized that anything that pre existed them would represent a challenge to their authority and their power. And, and that's what they couldn't have because they realized that these frothing at the mouth left wing ideologies that they espoused would never be able to compete in the marketplace of ideas. And therefore, they had to work it in to where they rewrote history.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw the same thing happen last summer after that senseless and tragic shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. We saw that just recently Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan allowed a vote to go forth to where they were denying the right to fly the Confederate battle flag on federal cemeteries, even if Confederate soldiers were buried there, except for small flags. And they said that the families could only lay those flags on 2 days: Confederate Memorial Day, which I find that difficult because there is no national Confederate Memorial Day, and on Memorial Day. Other than that, they'll come and take the flags up, and they will not allow you to speak your mind, in a sense. And that's a gross violation of the First Amendment. And I think it's a slap in the face of the Vanguard of Liberty, those brave young men and women who donned the uniform to fight for our freedoms and liberties. Because the whole idea behind the First Amendment is it's not necessarily speech that you would agree with.
It's
You see, it's to protect any speech. And it's designed to allow us to be able to speak our mind, because that is the only way that we can not only vet candidates who are vying for the highest offices in this land, it's the way to address grievances with this government, and it's all rooted in those natural law tenets that underpin not only our representative Republican form of government, but also our entire Constitution. It's what allows us to be Americans. And that's why Memorial Day is so important. It's because these people, I'm willing to live for the Constitution. You and I live for the Constitution.
yes.
These brave young men and women died for the Constitution. They died for our rights and our liberties. And they deserve to be honored. They deserve to be respected. And that is what this day is about. But we see that with the tenets of cultural Marxism that go around trying to destroy our history, erase it, and whitewash it, they are doing a great disservice to those who fought. Because they're trying to deny their history, they're trying to deny their struggle, and they're trying to deny the fight that those brave men and women had. And that is a travesty, and above that, it is a crime, as far as I'm concerned. It is a moral injustice. It is a moral turpitude being foisted upon the body politic of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic. And I can't stand the thought of it, because what they are doing by reworking this, they're trying to transform it into this notion of Memorial Day is just a 3-day weekend where you go out and you get to grill and have fun. Now, yes, it's important that you be able to bond with your family, but you need to keep in mind why we observe it. Because there were so many that we lost throughout these various wars since the American Civil War. And this day of observance is to remember all of our lost and fallen veterans. It's as a photograph that our first Air Marshal, Nelson Ward, had put up on social media said. It was a sign, and it said, "It's not the wind that causes our national flag to flutter. That is the last breath of every veteran who gave up their lives for our liberty."
And something like that, when you hear words like that, you unless you don't have a soul, you can't help but have a chill up your spine. And this is what's happening. This is with all the political correctness, with all this nonsensical drivel that they're trying to place upon us, modifying the names of things so that it's more appeasing and appealing to other people. Again, you touched on the very key issue with this, our First Amendment rights. Every single one of those individuals that belong to the Vanguard of Liberty paid the ultimate price so that we can have our say, so that their posterity can have their say, so that future generations of the United States can have their say. And what the problem is, people don't like what other people have to say. Well, too damn bad. You don't have the right to not be offended. If what I have to say offends you, I don't care. It really doesn't bother me. I had an incident earlier today, Randy, and I talked to you about it on the phone.
Right,
And
right.
it's just, it came to the point, and this is a perfect example. I took after a woman at the gas station because she had a lit cigarette hanging out of her car, 10 feet away from the pump. And I asked her, "Is that a lit cigarette?" "Yes. Would you mind putting it out?" "No, I'm far enough away." At that point, she decided that because she wanted to do something, exercise, her supposed rights. Well, she was putting me and my family and everybody else at that gas station in danger. I had to stand up and say something. Now, did I offend her? You're damn right I offended her. and
Yeah, but where in the
I
Constitution
offended.
is there any freedom from offense? Where in the
Absolutely not.
Constitution? There's none. It'll be
Article
found in
non,
Article
section
Non, Section
existent,
Existent, Clause
clause
0.
0. Exactly. And she got all upset, called the police on me. And it was funny because the officer that when I stayed there, she left. I stayed there and waited for the officer. He told me the reason why she called the police was because, well, you're exercising your Second Amendment right by openly carrying your firearm on your hip. That's what she was worried about. And I promptly told the officer she needs to get the hell out of my Faruqing country then. That's how that works. So she saw me with my firearm and me giving her hell because she's endangering my life. She took offense to that. What in the hell has this country come to?
Well, this is what happens when the Fabian socialists are able to clutch their claws into the body politic of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It all ties into this notion that they want to radically change us. Remember that when Obama was first vying for the highest office in the land back in 2008, he got in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and proudly proclaimed that we were 5 minutes from fundamentally transforming the nation. And that's what they were talking about. This idea of fundamentally transforming the nation is to erase the traditions and institutions that are the quintessential pillars of the American way of life. It is to erase the knowledge that we are a representative republic, and it's to erase things like Memorial Day's true purpose. Remember, he got into some hot water, I believe it was 2 to 3 years ago, for tweeting out a picture of him grilling and saying, quote unquote, happy Memorial Day. Again, enacting that social faux pas that many Americans do unintentionally. But in the case of Barack Hussein Obama, that was not an unintentional faux pas. That was intentionally done. That was intentionally done to snub the brave young soldiers, Marines, Navy sailors, and airmen of this country. It was done to attack our military, and it was disgusting. And that's the thing. Remembrance Day is such a better name for this time because think about how many we have lost from the time of the end of the Civil War in these last 151 years. We have lost a great many. And they were the best and brightest among us. And the reason we say that they were the best and brightest among us is they went above and beyond the call. They donned the uniform of this nation. They put their lives at risk. They leapt into harm's way without any second's hesitation or thought as to their own personal health, safety, and well-being. They were fighting for each other. And in so doing, they were fighting for the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this country, we the people. And you see, that's where the disconnect is with respect to people like Obama and with respect to the Fabian socialists that just have this diabolical hatred of our military. Because they know that our servicemen and women are of the caliber and of the courage and of the compassion to be the types that are they join the military because of their love of the nation. They join it because of their firm principles and convictions, and that's something we should applaud. That's something we should salute. And again, that's why we should take Memorial Day, or Remembrance Day as it was originally called, so seriously. Because it gives us that opportunity to properly pay our respects and tributes to those who made us who we are.
Yeah, and again, I go back to the show we did a couple shows back, where it seemed like I was starting off to go on a rant, but it was actually something that I've been dwelling on for quite some time, talking about my inability to, you know, serve in our military and our armed forces. And see, something like that weighs on me even more, especially when it comes to Remembrance Day, when it comes to Veterans Day, when it comes to the 4th of July, when it comes to Constitution Day, which is September 17th, when it comes to just about every single holiday or day of recognition where our military is involved, or there's something that pertains to our country as a whole. It will not, something like this, it won't let me not remember. I have no choice but to remember. This is my birthright as being a citizen of the United States. It's my principles, it's my ethics, it's my morals. It's all of that encompassed in this. That will not allow me to forget. This is why we're always telling people, don't abandon your principles. Never abandon your principles. It's better to stand on your principles and suffer through hard times and do the right thing than to abandon your principles and serve somebody on your knees. Because that's essentially what people are doing. And this is a part of that when people forget things that happened like 9/11, when they forget the whole auspice of what Remembrance Day or Memorial Day is, or Flag Day, Constitution Day, when people don't even acknowledge them. I know people that have, oh, it's Flag Day, they just go up and put their American flag up, and that's the only day of the year that they fly their flag. The only day of the year. And I don't, there's something drastically wrong with our society. We have to get back to the rudimentary functional principles of this. Why we have these things. Why history is a part of us. And we can't meddle with history by revising it or changing it. Because what you're doing is you're basically chipping away at your own soul. You're selling your soul piece by piece.
When you stop and think about it, what are the values and principles and convictions that drive Remembrance Day? What is it about the Vanguard of Liberty that would make them go and fight like they did? Well, first of all, it was their buddies next to them in the trenches. Mm-hmm. But remember, they take an oath of office. They take an oath. They swear an oath to uphold and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, whether they be foreign or domestic. You see, as we have reiterated on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the key to all of the problems which are currently facing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours is the Constitution. It is that very quintessential essence of who we are as a nation and as a people, and it is the only thing that really, truly unites us. Why does it unite us? Because it defines who we are as citizens. It defines what we are supposed to do in our capacity as popular sovereigns. Remember, the vanguards of liberty are the first line. It's the citizens that are behind that line. And we are still expected to carry out our roles, our duties, our obligations, and above all, our responsibilities. And that is what is always couched and connected with our fundamental and inalienable rights that were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature. And our primary duty is to proactively maintain, defend, and safeguard these fundamental and inalienable rights. Mm-hmm. And part of doing that is remembering the sacrifices that have been made so that we can live free, so that we can enjoy the barbecues, so that we can go out and enjoy our lives. So we shouldn't just think of Remembrance Day as some 3-day weekend. And I'm not trying to guilt trip people here. I'm trying to to place this in a bit of perspective, into the proper perspective of why it's so important. It's like how this month we lost the gunner of the Memphis Belle. At 94 years old, on May 6th of this year, he passed away in England, where he went for the first time since the end of the war. He died on the battlefield where so many of his friends, comrades, and brothers in arms passed away, and his family said that was how he wanted to go. And it explains that there is this brotherhood that exists with our servicemen and women that just is deep. It's very deep. And part of the purpose of Remembrance Day is to acknowledge that camaraderie, to acknowledge their bravery, their courage, and their convictions for our liberties. Because it's as I said at the opening of the program, while we lived for the Constitution, they died for it. Think of the amount of courage that takes. And then to belittle that as Obama did, and as a lot of our institutions of higher education have, by forcing recruiters off of campus or trying to shut down the Reserve Officer Training Corps, or ROTC, all of that is beyond belief. That is a slap in the face to the vanguard of liberty, and it shows just how disingenuous these people are. And it speaks again to the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs and what he said over 50 years ago in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard. He said, these Fabian socialists are infesting our institutions of higher education and indoctrinating the up-and-coming generations. And if we're not careful, they will indoctrinate those generations which have yet to be born. And again, this is why we, on past episodes, have warned of the danger of historical revisionism, of Fabian socialism, of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, who are attempting to peddle a propagandistic agenda for the twisted purpose of tearing this nation apart at the seams. And they do it by dishonoring these troops. Think of the way Hillary dishonored those who passed away at Benghazi. Those who were murdered. It was an Islamic video or an anti-Islamic video? No, it wasn't. And they knew it wasn't. That is a disgrace.
Sure. And, when you mention, think about what it is. Like you said, you and I live for the Constitution. They died for it. The Bible says, there is no greater love than that of a person who would lay down their life for another. And to me, it's exemplified. It's not just one person laying down their life for one other individual person. Those that are in the vanguard of liberty, they each individually laid down their life for all of us. Not only those that were living at that time, but also the future generations yet to come. Not just for you and I, Randy, not just for our, children and our grandchildren, but our grandchildren's grandchildren. This is why we are so adamant about, destroying revisionist history, declaring war on political correctness. You hear all these sycophantic sideshow freaks within the LGBT XYZ community.
STFU, WTF,
yeah. And they have this mantra, well, we live love, and love is love, and no matter what. You don't know what love is. You truly do not know what love is. These individuals that we are remembering with this special occasion, they knew what love was. They exemplified it. And you know what? They laid down their lives because they loved this country. They loved the embodiment of it. They loved the citizens, regardless if you were black or white, Hispanic, regardless if you came here from another country, regardless of your sexual preference. They loved each and every person because they loved the founding principles and inalienable rights that were endowed to each one of those individuals. And that transposes right across the board of what love is. But yet, all these, again, these sycophantic sideshow freaks, they have no clue. Why? Because of political correctness crap.
And it goes even beyond that. It's that they don't want to know. They don't care. Let's
Because it
look back.
offends them.
Well, screw that.
Yeah.
Let's look back at the annals of our history again. Why did the Confederate widows and the mothers and daughters and sons and fathers that had lost loved ones in that war feel it so necessary to go lay the wreaths, and the North felt it so necessary to come out and reach out in a conciliatory nature? We forget that on both sides of that war, entire towns were basically wiped out because all of the men, the young men of that town, went to fight for a cause they believed in. Whether
Bloodlines were wiped out.
Yes, whether you thought that cause was justified or not, the fact that they were willing to put their lives on the line, and there were entire communities annihilated in that conflict. No, they deserve to be honored. They deserve to be respected. Because no matter what the revisionists try to say, everyone who died in that conflict died an American. Mm-hmm. They were Americans. They were fighting in American towns, on American farms, on American fields, and it was Americans who suffered. We lost 2% of the population in that war. 2% of the population. That is staggering. No, it is horrifying.
Imagine if we lost 2% of our population because of a similar conflict that could happen. How devastating that would be to this country, especially with having other countries just, licking their lips, waiting for an opportunity to swoop in and finish us off. I mean, it's something that really needs to be pondered and thought about, because, again, it's historical relevance, which is applicable today, which will be applicable 151 years from now. And with again, those mothers, daughters, those family members, both from the North and the South, that consolidation between the North and the South coming together, I think there was a deeper point to that. It was the point of realizing what had happened, what they had done to themselves, in creating this in hopes that nothing like that would ever befall this nation ever again.
It's
set as a reminder as to how bad it was.
Right. Well, it's as the old adage goes, there's no winners in civil strife or in civil war.
Yeah.
Everyone loses. Everyone loses. Because think of it, the United States of America truly is a family. And that is what makes all of the turmoil that we see unfurling before our eyes, all of these devious machinations by those Fabian socialists that push cultural Marxism, that push the balkanization, that basically erases this notion that the United States is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what makes it so devious and so dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's because it pits us against one another as we were pitted against one another 151 years ago. Sure. And if it is shattered like it was back then, it will take us much, much longer to come together. It would take us much longer to reconciliate with one another. And the bad blood would still be felt. I mean, we still feel many of the scars of that war very poignantly. Mm-hmm. And it's tragic. It's tragic that we ever had to go through it. It's tragic that it ever happened, but it did. And we see from it that the whole purpose of Remembrance Day was about healing. It was about doing our best to come together in solidarity and unity, to stand shoulder to shoulder, to stand up for what is right, to ensure that our future will be able to enjoy and exercise the rights that we do. It's about promoting the natural law. And how often has that come under attack in the parlance of modern society? How often have the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media made light of that?
Mm-hmm.
Far too often. And it doesn't bode well for the foreseeable future of this country. Right now, we are as divided as we were in 1860.
Yeah.
That's a scary, scary, very scary thought.
And with election day fast approaching, you know, one only has to again look to history to see an equivalency of what would be considered to be a spark of potentially the next civil war. God forbid. I mean, if Trump is elected or if Hillary's elected, I have a bad feeling, Randy, that there's going to be so much division amongst this country, more than what we're seeing now, that it's just I don't know if I don't know if you and I will see the repairing to that in our lifetime.
Most likely not. Most
I
likely
would
not.
like to hope, I would like to think that we would, and I would like to think that people would say, wait a second, we're not going to allow this to happen again. We're going to nip it in the bud right now, and we're going to take care of it. See, this is why we do this show and we have these episodes for folks, is to empower them to have the understanding, the historical understanding, the knowledge and complete working understanding of our shared Constitution in order to prevent something like that from happening. Or should something like that happen or come to fruition, to rectify the situation in an extreme timely manner. And again, it's a fear that I have that I don't want to see my grandchildren have to go through worrying about this stuff, because let's face it, I'm going to be brutally honest. Even though I could teach them the principles, the shared principles that I have that were passed on from my parents and on to my kids, and then on so on down the line. At what point are they going to become the super minority to where they're grossly outnumbered by individuals who don't care, don't want to care, that do
It's already started.
and it's already started, and it has to stop. It has to stop, because if it doesn't, the United States of America, the great republic that we are, the greatest republic in all the world, will cease to exist.
And it's all by design. You see, that's what's truly nefarious about it. That is what really, really burns deep in my heart and soul, is the fact that this is intentionally being attacked by
Mm-hmm.
those who want to propagate a system that has failed, by the very sort of mentality that so many of the Vanguard of Liberty, those brave men and women who donned the uniform of the United States and sacrificed their lives for our liberties, fought against.
And
When
what
Bernie
see,
Sanders sat there and admitted in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that he was a quote unquote democratic socialist, he was espousing a mentality that we fought against in World War II.
mm-hmm.
Because whether it's National Socialism, Democratic Socialism, that ludicrous term of libertarian socialism, it doesn't matter. Socialism is socialism is socialism, and it's diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Constitution, and pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, that means it's violative of the supreme law of the land. That
Mm-hmm.
means that we must stand in stark opposition to it, because they are the ones that are besmirching, belittling, spitting in the face of our brave service members, the brave vanguards of liberty. That cannot be allowed to continue. And it is a sad state of affairs when the United States of America can have a candidate like that almost be viable and acceptable. In
And
years past, he would have been chased out.
yeah, and see, this is what is even more of a deep concern, Randy. That these things are happening. It was all done by design. It was done through incrementalization. What's even more heartbreaking and saddening than that is that we have individuals in this country who know better than to abandon their principles, who know better than to latch onto something like that. And they only do it because they want to stay on board. They want to, still be able to have their tea times with their friends and their social gatherings. They don't want to have any kind of discrepancies or animosity between their families and their friends because there's a disagreement of which political candidate they're going to support. And so they're doing, see, that's called greed. Those individuals are greedy individuals. They're more concerned about their own social status than the viable existence and perpetuity of our republic. That's what's the, and they know better. They know better. They know that the things that they support are completely contrary to the supreme law of the land. But yet they forego that and go headstrong towards something to support something that is totally against their principles. They've abandoned their principles. They've forsaken their obligation and duties as citizens. For what? Because
Fear.
they don't want to be embarrassed, or they don't want to.
Fear.
They don't want to lose friends.
Fear.
Yeah.
You see, when the nation is as divided as it is now, there is fear. A lot of these individuals are brave. Some of them are veterans themselves,
Yes.
and it's painful to see that. But it's either fear that the nation is too far gone and that we need to turn to a strong man to save it. But if you recall, and go back to what our founding fathers said and the way that they designed and intended for this representative republic to work, they designed the very government to be in such a way that a strong man could not have that kind of power.
Mm-hmm.
But we see that under the tutelage of these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, that he has worked relentlessly and tirelessly towards undoing all of the safety valves that were written into our Republican form of government by the infinite wisdom and foresight of our founding fathers to protect us from those twisted sorts of machinations for the very purpose of creating essentially a dictatorship of the proletariat. But even that is a bit of a misnomer because it's a dictatorship of President Peel and Squeal himself.
Mm-hmm.
He is dishonoring this nation time and time again. And one of the things that he did as we are approaching Memorial Day, and it is very, very, very irritating to me on a personal level, and that is he went and he apologized for the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And let me explain my personal connection to that and why it bothers me. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, Grant A. Brown, was in JAG Corps. He was on the chief of staff, or he was the chief of staff for General Marshall. He was the liaison for JAG to go into Congress to get funding for the Pacific Theater. He helped draft the armistice with Japan. And that meant he helped get funding for the Manhattan Project. It means he helped get funding for the Enola Gay, which dropped those bombs. It meant that he had this inherent knowledge that there was something that was very important. Of course, he didn't have the knowledge of what the bomb was. He just got the funding for it. But he understood that there was a great chance that we could have lost over 1 million men in attempting to take Japan. And here is that sniveling little son of a female dog going to Japan bowing down and apologizing for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, has the Empire of Japan ever apologized for December 7th, 1941?
Nope.
No. Have they apologized for the rape of Nanking? No.
No.
So why in the hell are we apologizing? Why in the hell is it always with these twisted Fabian socialist types our fault? Hey, Obama, go to hell. Stay there. We don't want you.
You know, again, I can see the premise, and this is just me and how I look at things. I'm kind of a brash individual. I've come to think sometimes before I speak. More often than not, I'll think before I speak. But sometimes I have a hard time conveying what I need to tell people. Because sometimes I choose, I have a bad choice of words. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to say I've got, a bunch of, I consult my brain about this. No, I'm not going to do any of that crap. Because here's the fact.
That makes you better than Trump.
Here's the fact, okay? And as Nelson Ward would say, the fact of the matter is, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, those were necessary events. For what? For the preservation of our republic. Because let's think about what would have happened if we didn't do that. See, just like you said, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. You mentioned
Right.
Pearl Harbor. Now, I believe it was Admiral Yamamoto that, after Pearl Harbor happened, or during the course of Pearl Harbor at some point, he said to invade the United States. He warned against it. And remember, we talked about him before. He was educated
There's a sniper
here.
behind every
blade of grass.
And yes, he was educated at Harvard.
Yes. And so he understood. He understood the underlying principles of why America is so great and will always be great.
And remember,
back
he
then
said,
he even understood America. He would have even said today, he would have looked at Trump and said, "You're full of sake. America doesn't need to be made great again because it has always been great ever since its inception."
right.
And
And it's as he said. I fear what we have done. All we have done is awoken
a sleeping
a
giant.
sleeping giant.
Yes. And he was right.
Of course.
He was right. And again, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, those were necessary events. Those needed to be done. And just
Believe
like
it or not, they were compassionate. They were compassionate events because the Japanese were training their men, women, and children to strap explosives to themselves, to roll under tanks, to blow themselves up, to commit bonsai charges. Now, folks, what bonsai means is may you live 1,000 years. It would be you live 1,000 years in the afterlife. It would be suicidal. They were prepared to fight to every last one. A conventional invasion of the Japanese islands would have cost well over 1 million American lives and would have caused the eradication of the Japanese people. It was an act of compassion to make a weapon so terrible that it would make them surrender.
Yeah. And again, through this tyrannical administration that has been plaguing our republic for the past 7 years, 8.5 years, we've seen nothing from him except bowing and apologizing to people. Here's the thing. It's rant time, folks. Here's the thing. We are the United States of America. We are the big dogs on the block. We are the greatest country that has ever graced God's green earth. And when we fail to act like that, we're going to have nefarious and savory individuals that want to do harm to us. They will stop at nothing to do harm to us. Just like Randy said, the Japanese were training to become bonsai IEDs.
Yeah.
Well, look at what's happening now with the Taliban, with ISIS, all of these Islamic terrorists. Every single one of them. There's peaceful Muslims. I don't buy it. I'm not buying it because if they adhere to the teachings of Muhammad,
Right.
then you know what's going to happen? They're going to do the same things. They're going to do it in a vindictive fashion. It's all going to be vengeful and all based on revenge. We have to stop them, or any other entity or organization or country that wants to do harm to us. This is called having a set of a swinging pair between your legs. You don't relent on those individuals. We didn't relent on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and as Randy says, they were compassionate strikes. And here's why: because what it did was it saved the lives of so many Japanese individuals.
Yes,
Not
it
only
did.
Americans, but Japanese individuals, because it put a stop to it. It put a stop and made them wake up and realize, holy crap, these guys are not playing around. We're not willing to sacrifice our entire culture and existence because we got bamboozled into this ridiculous notion of supreme ultimate world domination. Because that's what happened when they aligned themselves with Hitler. They became one of the Axis powers.
Mm-hmm.
And we put a stop to it. If the United States is to remain what we are, we have to continue to do that. People don't like it. Oh, there's innocent people. You know what? Such is life. C'est la vie.
Well,
Because
think about it. Innocent people died in Pearl Harbor. Innocent people were targeted by the Japanese balloon bombs. That didn't work. Do you
innocent people
realize
died on
that-
9/11.
Yes. But staying on the course of World War II, do you realize that the Japanese used clay bombs filled with plague-infected fleas that they dropped on China to spread bubonic plague, the Black Death, to purposefully and intentionally kill people that they thought were lesser subhumans? That sort of mentality is the twisted evil. It is the same evil in the group that Obama called the junior varsity, the Islamo-fascist barbarian state ISIS. They see anyone who is not Islamic as subhuman. It is the same type of fanaticism. And I always have to cringe when the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media attempt to claim that we have never seen this type of hypersensitive sort of superiority complex or this sort of barbarism. Yes, we have seen this sort of fanaticism before. And then when they try and compare that to people that want to uphold, defend, and preserve the supreme law of the land, our Constitution, that is beyond insulting. It is to the point of where they are essentially becoming enemies of the state on their own, because they are besmirching the memory of those who laid down their lives for this country. And then think of the way that Obama has just been letting out all of these destructive Islamo-fascists that are housed at Guantanamo Bay. He's letting them go, and they're now picking up arms again against the United States. The Vanguard of Liberty suffered under the hands of these tyrants. The Vanguard of Liberty fought to put these people away, and they were there to gain information so that we wouldn't have to sacrifice more of the best and brightest of the best and brightest on God's green earth. But Obama doesn't care. Obama will stoop to weaken the United States. He will take any and every step necessary to bludgeon us, to harm us, to cause our reputation worldwide to deteriorate, you know what that does? That creates a power vacuum. And it means that potentates, tyrants, despots, and dictators, the worst ilk that is out there, will try and rise to fill that gap. Look at Putin. Look at the destabilization that is occurring in Eastern Europe, particularly in the Ukraine. Look at how the issue in Turkey, Syria, and all of the Middle East has just gotten worse and worse and worse because Obama's leading from his behind. How is that serving American interests? It's not. Everything he does is diametrically opposed to America's interests, and that's by design.
Well, sure. And I mean, just look at what he's done to the military. We could take it down a couple of notches. They're grossly and inadequately equipped. He's prevented them from. He's changed the rules of engagement. You can't engage an enemy and fire upon them until they fire upon you, and you make your life is in extreme danger. Guess what? Here's an idea, genius. The second that they load up onto one of their planes or their helicopters, the moment they enlist and they sign on the dotted line to take that oath to uphold, protect, and defend the United States Constitution, they take that oath of allegiance, not to you, you narcissistic baboon. They take that oath for the United States. Yes, they serve under you as commander-in-chief, but guess what? If you give an unlawful order, meaning anything that is contrary to the Constitution, they have the authority to tell you to go farouk yourself. But
That's
you
right.
seem to think that they can't do that because you seem to think that you call all the shots. I'm the commander-in-chief, and let me make this perfectly clear. We'll get to the queer part of the military later, but, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and it's okay. I mean, these guys, they really like it. Shut up. Go to hell. Do it as many times as you see fit to do so. Because all you have done is you have become a plague. You have diseased our country. You have diseased the morals and ethics. And you've diseased the American people.
Remember when he went to the Coast Guard class that was graduating? This would have been about a year or two back. And he said that climate change was a threat to national security. This was around the same time that he was calling ISIS a junior varsity team. It is that sort of twisted machination and thought that really, really, really attacks our servicemen and women. And think about how Bernard Sanders said that climate change caused terrorism. This inability and this purposefully attempting to avoid calling our enemy for who they are, that has got to stop. We have got to pull our heads out of the sand, draw a line, and take a stance. Now, a lot of people thought that that is what they would be getting from the New York businessman, billionaire, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller. But we see that he's already come out and said that everything that he has said on the campaign trail thus far are mere suggestions, open to and subject to immediate change. He even said that the new Islamic mayor of London, that Khan character, would be an exception to his temporary moratorium on Islamic immigration into the United States. Again, if he cannot stay on track, and if he cannot be consistent other than being consistently inconsistent, that means that we are going to face greater instability, greater danger, greater threat of harm. That is the last thing I want to see for the Vanguard of Liberty. Because they're already suffering. What was it, a week or two, or perhaps a month ago, that we lost a B-52? Mm-hmm. They're basically taking parts off of museum pieces to keep these birds flying. Why are we purposefully hampering, harming, hindering the best and brightest among us? That is an insult. That is a crime because it
because
is
of
putting
political
us at
correctness.
severe risk.
Because of
Severe risk.
because of political correctness. They're more worried. They're more intrigued by spending millions of dollars in funding to find out what makes lesbians fat. Why? Who cares? You know what makes
Food.
you
Food makes them fat.
Food, the inability to have a high level of self-esteem and actually be able to think for themselves. Oh, I was born this way. No, you were born stupid. You're just living your life as a practice piece. Stop it. I can tell you what makes lesbians fat. It's not only food, but you know what? Them being allowed to behave the way that they do. Political correctness made lesbians fat. That's the end of your funding. Now, if the government wants to go ahead and give me $2 million to divulge that thesis, I'll write it up. It'll be a couple of pages long. I can make sure of that. I have no problem with that. And then I'd take that $2 million in funding that they would give me to do this research, and guess what I would do? I would donate it to, like, the VA. See, our VA is suffering horribly because of the individuals that are running the VA, but because of also the way the funding is dispersed in Washington. And this is what I don't understand, why people would jump behind Trump. Trump is, he not once has he mentioned that he's going to do away with unneeded spending. He's supposed to be this brilliant businessman, but yet businessmen do one thing. They focus on their bottom dollar, the bottom line. Where's my money going, and how can I prevent it from going where I don't want it to? That's what they focus on. But no, he's not even focused on that. Oh, well, I'm going to end Common Core. No, you're not. No, you're not. You even said that you want to keep certain aspects of the Department of Education around. Why? The Department of Education is unconstitutional. Period. It has no constitutional authority to exist. None.
Of course not. But remember, he has, by his own admission, never really once fully read through the Constitution because he claimed there's no value in it. But pointing back to the VA, the Veterans Administration, when that sycophantic, faceless, nameless, and ultimately unaccountable bureaucrat compared the long lines and the long waits that the Vanguard of Liberty has to go through in order to get life-saving treatment to a long line at Disneyland, that crossed so many borders with me. That burnt so many bridges. That got my blood boiling beyond anything else. How dare that sniveling little worm? And I'm not even trying to insult worms here. I know that I have. How dare he? How dare he do that? This administration is beyond incompetent, and it is time that the buck stops at the top. Yeah. Because he is the one that has allowed this nonchalant approach of endangering the best and brightest among us at carte blanche. Well, enough is enough. It is time that we, the popular sovereigns, put our foot down on the neck of this leviathan of an out-of-control, overzealous, illicit, and rogue and tyrannical government. It is time that we demand that we return to the tenets contained within our Constitution, to the proper scope and application of government as outlined, defined, and mandated by the Constitution. So for as long as we continue down the path of the status quo, things are only going to get worse. America will only continue to be on this death spiral that is threatening the sanctity of this nation. And it is destroying the flower of this nation. And I cannot stand to see it. It burns me.
And again, we've mentioned so many times that forsaking the memories of the heroes that this country has had over the duration of its lifetime. Every person who is put on the uniform, regardless of what their political bent is, this or that, they have my respect. with the exception of a few individuals who decide to where they're going to take their service and they're going to use it as a crutch in order to further advance a political agenda. Those individuals, you're despicable. You're absolutely despicable. You have tarnished your oath that you took to uphold, protect, and defend the United States Constitution. You want to use your service. And individuals I'm talking about would be individuals like John McCain. My friends, I was a Vietnam, POW. And
Like John Kerry.
John Kerry, John McCain, John Murtha. Remember John Murtha? Now,
Yep.
it what it leaves me speechless when individuals do that. Again, it burns me just like it does you, Randy. More so with me, I think, or me personally, because I had aspirations of going into the military. If I could just give anything to wear the uniform, if I was presented with an opportunity, no strings attached, to wear the uniform, and when I say no strings attached, I mean that there would be nothing prohibiting me from doing it, I would jump at it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't think twice about it. Absolutely would not even give it a second thought. I would do it. Just because it would be a way for me to make amends with myself for allowing others to persuade me not to go. And that would be a way for me to make amends to my country in servitude.
What gets me is the way that they attack the memory of both my grandfathers, because both of them were involved in the Pacific Theater. My maternal grandfather was here. My paternal grandfather was on the ground in Guadalcanal. He was in the Philippines. He was in the fight for Manila. He was being shot at as he was trying to blow up bridges. He knew the savagery of the Japanese. And believe me, they were exceedingly savage. I mean, one of the stories my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was an army nurse in the Philippines, told was how when we had recaptured the hospitals, the Japanese had gone through and poured concrete into each of the commodes just so we couldn't use them. That speaks to the type of fight that our veterans faced. It was brutal, where the Japanese would come out pretending to surrender, to be carrying a grenade to kill the American soldiers that they were surrendering to. These are the facts of history they're not teaching anymore. And for that little jackwad, President Peel and Squeal himself, to go and apologize for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, screw you, Obama. You ought to apologize to the men who were killed on Iwo Jima, to the men that were killed at Cabanatuan, at the men who were killed at Wake Island, for the men that were killed all throughout the island hopping campaign. But you don't have the balls to do that.
No, of course not. They're in Michelle's purse, according to Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
So, and again, we have allowed ourselves as a country, and folks, we're not placing all the blame directly on one person. There's plenty of blame to go around to each and every one of us. Because at some point down the line, each and every one of us, myself and Randy included, have dropped the ball somewhere. And the point behind all of this is to say that those of us who realize that the ball has been dropped, it's our obligation to pick it up and run with it. That's what we need to do. We can sit here and blame people all day long until we're blue in the face, and it's not going to make a bit of difference if we don't take the action to rectify the situation. That's all there is to it. Our founding fathers, at some points, the ball was dropped with them. regarding certain things. And what did they do? Did they sit there and point the finger at each other all day long and then not do anything about it? No, they got off their duffs, put on their wool clothing, congregated in a very small room in the middle of July, in the middle of the summer, the hottest, with no air conditioning. No air conditioning. Could you imagine the stench that came out of Independence Hall?
With shut windows. They shut the windows because,
They
again,
didn't want people, they were afraid people were going to hear and try and sabotage it.
oh, and not only that, it would have been considered an act of treason.
Yes.
Because what they were doing was tearing apart the existing government.
Yes. And they did all of that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, wearing the clothing that they did and being in the small confines with that many people in there in such a small room, that was nothing compared to the reward that came out of that. See, even the atrocities and the besmirchments and the insults and the degradation that the Chiquita in Chief has done, that Trumpolini has done with dividing the base, basically essentially saying that we don't need the conservative base, we don't need their help, we're going to have Bernie Sanders supporters. See, when you want to enlist individuals that will do nothing, that will fall on their own swords in order to advance a cause that is diametrically opposed to what this country was founded on, when you're willing to enlist those individuals, that makes you a nefarious individual yourself. When you even bring it up and say you're going to even attempt to do it, you can't be trusted. We can look at all the characters in this theater, in this play, this Shakespearean tragedy, so to speak, of what's befallen our country. And through all of the thickness of that, there is still something that can be accomplished out of it. And only if we the people are willing to do it. Only if we the people are willing to pick up that ball and run towards that end zone and carry that weight.
And it's always going to fall back on the fact that the Constitution is the key. And I know that we repeat this oft times on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but it's because it's the truth. It's a message that needs to be repeated. It's a message that has been all but forgotten in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And how has it been forgotten? Well, again, because of the twisted Fabian socialist agenda of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, because of the Fabian socialists who have infiltrated our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border, but also because of complacency in the hearts, souls, and minds of far too many Americans. Because there is this sense of defeatism that has gripped us, because we have grown basically complacent with our laurels. We have rested on our laurels, and that has allowed these nefarious people to get in. And we have been talking about the World War II generation that has been dying off and various members of the Vanguard of Liberty. But one of the great misconceptions that so many coming home from World War II had was, look at the evil that our government fought to stop. Look at what we vanquished. Our government is benevolent. Our government fought for freedom. Our government will never turn on us. Wrong. Wrong. The government turned on us. The government was working against them. What they forgot was in the 1930s, when the veterans of World War I, members of the Vanguard of Liberty, who were promised their pensions but weren't paid it, went to Washington, put up little tents, had their families with them. FDR's response? To send tanks and troops to open fire on our veterans. Nobody talks about that. Nobody hardly remembers the pension march and what happened. But we do.
And
We know what it did and how it harmed us as a nation and as a people.
well, you look at the individual that FDR was, a Fabian socialist himself, and with the pension march doing that, that's right up his alley. He created the dissension amongst the ranks at that point. He created a sense of divisionism between the people and the government, but then he would reel the people into the government side with what?
Propaganda.
Propaganda. He would bring them back in. This whole welfare thing that he started up. Doing all this and doing all that. He suffered. See, and again, Fabians have been at this for
over a century and a half.
Over a century, 150, almost 150 years. And why are they still allowed to be able to do these things? Because they're patient. They know that if they they fall into hard times, or something doesn't go their way, all they have to do is, okay, we're going to batten down the hatches. We're going to weather through this little storm. We're going to gauge everything, analyze everything, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hit it even harder. See, that's what we the people need to do. That's what we need to do. The only way to combat Fabianism and political correctness, revisionist history, and indoctrination of the youth is very simple. You have to beat them at their own game. You have to use their own rules against them. And then by doing so, you are able to establish your own new set of rules that you will be able to implement from that point on.
The other aspect of it is we have to get rid of this notion that there's going to be instant gratification in this.
Yeah.
We have to become very, very instrumental in how we do this, and incremental in how we apply it.
Patience.
And that means that our plan needs to be a 100-year plan, because that is what they've done. They have had over 100 years to tear apart and unravel the societal fabric of our republic. It means that we have to be willing to fight fire with fire. But we have one advantage that the Fabian socialists never did. You see, we have the Constitution. We have the framework of what it is we need to get back to already established. And it has been proven as a solid, working governmental form. Their whole system's based off of a failure. Mm-hmm. Show me any place in the world where socialism hasn't failed, because you're not going to be able to. Socialism, by its nature, is inherently a flawed, failing system, because it is theft by any other name. But the mistake that so many on the right have made is, because we understand righteousness is on our side, because we understand that truth is on our side, we think that that should instantly convince people and that it will just instantly occur. But it never happens that way. Look how hard our founding fathers had to fight to establish this country. Look how close we came to losing the cause of independence throughout that war. George Washington lost most of his battles. He lost most of his battles, and half the time he was having to fight with Congress for funding to keep them fed.
Not to mention the infighting amongst his ranks and individuals that become
generals. Yeah, generals that were within their own ranks, that people that were trying to backstab him, like Granny Gates.
Mm-hmm.
And then people that betrayed America, surrendering West Point to England. That was Benedict Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me, since we are on Memorial Day, or approaching Memorial Day, it reminds me of a great story that comes out of the American Revolution. Remember that at the Battle of Cowpens, Benedict Arnold's leg was wounded by an artillery shrapnel. Basically, a round exploded near him and it embedded in his leg. And after he had turned turncoat, he had captured some Americans. And he went to a young private that was there who didn't recognize him. And he said, "What would you do if you captured the great Benedict Arnold?" He said, "We would cut off the leg that was wounded at the Battle of Cowpens and bury it with full military honors. The rest of him, we'd hang."
You know, I'd like to think that we would have a response like that.
So would I. But it shows that great burning spirit,
Yes.
that yearning for freedom that is an integral part of our DNA. You know, Obama goes out there and says that racism is the inherent part of our DNA. Bovine excrement. Freedom, liberty, justice, and a true sense of equality are the true integral parts of what it is to be an American citizen. That is why the Vanguard of Liberty goes out and risks their lives. It's why they do it without a second thought. And it is certainly damn well why they deserve the honor that they have received, because they have gone the extra mile for the good, decent, compassionate things about our nation, the very things that they are not being rewarded for by this regime. And then think about the other people who serve. Think about the law enforcement officers who have been targeted by these nefarious terrorist groups. Yes, there are bad apples in every profession, but there are so many in law enforcement who really do try to stand up for the Constitution. They take an oath to uphold it. There are many who don't, but there are more who do. And to have them attacked as they have been. Think back to when Obama said that the police acted stupidly when that professor was trying to break into his own home. That was acting stupidly? No, it's pretty stupid to lose your key and then break into your own home, and your neighbor calls the police because, oh, I don't know, for some stupid reason they gave a damn about your property.
Yeah. And why is it that the neighbor would call the police on you for breaking into your own home? Well, I can tell you why. Because your neighbor probably didn't recognize you. And why is that? Probably because you were a social hermaphrodite and kept to yourself, or didn't want to be bothered with being involved with your neighbor, even if it's just to say hi. See, that's part of the other problem. You know, it's this social hermetism that people are, you know, their faces are buried in their phones, their little iPads, and, you know, all this other nonsensical technical crap. Okay? Now, granted, folks, I have an iPhone. Okay? I have the latest and greatest. Let me tell you, it's great. It's huge. But guess what? I got it for free. Am I going to use it? Yes. Does it serve a need for me? Yes. Do I absolutely have to have it? No. But I've earned it. But I know how to use it responsibly. Unlike all these other individuals, people texting while driving, people, you know, you can't even go out to dinner anymore with your family and look at other families sitting around at other tables without everybody having their face buried in their phone, instead of spending time together as a family. This goes all the way back to why there was a solidarity between the North and the South with Remembrance Day. It's all linked together. We have divorced ourselves and allowed ourselves to become so complacent away from the true values of what makes this country great.
And in so doing, we've lost any sense of there being commonality, there being a common thread.
This
Remember,
is why people call the police on their neighbors for breaking into their own homes.
Right. But remember that the thing that unifies us It's the very thing that the Vanguard of Liberty, the very thing that I swore an oath as an attorney to uphold. The Constitution. That is the common thread. That is the commonality. You know what brought the South back in at the end of the Civil War? It wasn't necessarily that they were defeated on the battleground. It was that there was a promise that we would return to the Constitution. And you see, that was the rally cry of people like Robert E. Lee. It's we return to the Constitution, we pick up the pieces, we do our part to be productive citizens, because that is what our nation needs. Where is that now? Our military has it. The police, for the most part, have it. The good and decent people who have stood up and fought for our rights, like Ted Cruz, like Mike Lee, like Ben Sass,
Louis
Gohmert, they stand up for it. Steve King also.
Yeah.
They stand up for it. They take that oath seriously. But what about Trump? I don't see it.
Well, he's never taken the oath, ever.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I say that, and people will say, well, you're not a lawyer, you're not in law enforcement, you've never been in the military, you've never taken the oath. But here's the thing.
We all take it.
You're right. But I haven't personally spoke the words of the oath. However, I have made an oath right here on the Wright flyer that my allegiance, first of all, is to God Almighty. Second of all, it's to the Constitution, then to my country, and then my family. Because, see, without God, we would not have our Constitution. Without the Constitution, we would have no country for which to fight and die for. And without our country, my family would have no place to live in true freedom. That's how that works. That's why it is listed in that order. Now, I want to say this, Randy, before I forget. For all of those who we remember and prepare to remember this weekend, all of those who have taken the oath and live by that oath and have never abandoned their principles, those individuals are the true auspice and spirit of hashtag 6-2 or fight. Every single one of them. See, folks, 6-2 or fight has been around for a long, long time. A long time. People have forgotten it. People have forgotten it because they've become dumbed down and complacent. Because of propaganda, because of revisionism, because of political correctness. Indoctrination. And it's time we bring it back. It's time people realize what 6-2 or fight really is.
Because Article 6, Clause 2 states that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And as we have reiterated so many times on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the Constitution is that common thread that unites all of us, both as a nation and as a people. It is what makes us a family. It is that great social contract, the greatest gift, the greatest inheritance that any people have ever been the beneficiaries of on the face of this earth, because it is based on those timeless natural law principles that underpin our government and our Constitution. Those same principles that by their very nature are timeless, thereby just as applicable today as they were 230 years ago, as God willing they will be 230 years plus now. But you know what? It means we have to stand up in solidarity and unity for it. It means we have to stand shoulder to shoulder, prepared to make the same type of sacrifices that the Vanguard of Liberty has made for us. Because that is our duty. our obligation, and above all, our responsibility as popular sovereigns. Again, this is why we come to these microphones and do these shows, to empower you, to foster this fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable rights. Because if we lose our rights, we lose everything. But as long as we stand together, no force on earth can stop us. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Let's all raise our glasses in a toast to the Vanguard of Liberty, because they deserve it. They are the best and brightest of the best and brightest. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. We want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer, folks. We do this for you to empower you, and we invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have either here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of that, we invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page that has audio blogs, and our Cafe Press account, which has all sorts of apparel with our logo on it and our first class passengers logo on it. It would make a great gift for a member of the Vanguard of Liberty. I'm sure they would appreciate it. And it would help us to continue to keep the fight going. Folks, again, we couldn't do this without you. Thank you for tuning into the Wright Flyer. We will see you next time. Do take care.